Hi, everybody. It's Andy from Inside the Music. And on today's episode of 5 and 5, I have a very special guest by the name of Mike LeDoux's, right?
LeDoux, close enough.
LeDoux's, I'm sorry. Gosh darn it.
No, it's
I
all
just
good.
went
It's all
over
good.
this with you and I screwed that up.
It's all good.
I'm sorry, man.
That's just how we make the opener interesting.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. That's it. So this is our first time actually getting to meet face to face.
That's true.
So to speak,
Yes.
via Zoom.
Yes. Yep.
So,
Yep.
and it's always better to have these conversations than to sit there and try to write some up with these big old monkey thumbs, over a messenger.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah, I hear you.
please tell everyone where you can find your music.
Yeah. So, I think you'll link stuff in the description that I
Sure.
gave you, but just, if like anyone's just watching this part of the video, LeDoux's Music Official is .com is the website for just anything music related. And then WOASpodcast.com is the URL for all things for the podcast. But just if you just want to listen to something quick, just Mike LeDoux on Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, all the platforms, yada yada, and you'll likely get me as the first hit.
Right.
Yeah. So
and his web link it's a landing page for everything that's on there. So you can find it all on that landing page. So.
Yep. Good old DistroKid with their hyper follow pages,
Nothing wrong with that, man. That's all good. That's all good.
Yeah.
And please, you got check out his podcasts. Some great topics. The fun thing about these whole type of interviews that I'm doing is that you have no idea what the questions are going to be.
Good.
And I have my list of questions here with a couple little handwritten notes on them.
Awesome.
And so with that, what do you say we jump on in here?
Let's do it, my man.
All right. So first question.
Yeah.
Can you remember what was the first song that really stuck with you to make you enjoy music at another level?
And we're not talking like necessarily like led me into production or writing.
No, I'm talking about
something that clicked.
Yeah, something that clicked. Like when I was a kid, there's 2 or 3 songs that I can remember, that just still remember them today. As far as those were the songs that I listened to over and over again.
Yeah.
And then they weren't kid music. It was.
Sure. Yeah. I would say that's a good question and a quite a tricky one. And by the way, the 5 up front are the kind of longer form, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The longer ones are the 5 up front. And then if you want to expand on the rapid fire, what I call rapid fire, you may expand on them. So.
Okay. All right. So it's a little tricky to kind of, pin it down to the first thing that resonated because music was on my radar from a very young age. Right. But that doesn't mean that everything I heard resonated. So to try to pick something out of that, let's say like before I was 12 is a little tricky. I can tell you a lot of like songs I remember from the radio and things that I thought were interesting, but didn't exactly, pun intended, strike a chord until about when, let's say a lot of my peers would have also been getting into the music that we started to listen to regularly and then maybe even still listen to now. So, mostly rock, let's say. Around the age of 12, 9 Inch Nails comes to mind as far as something that really stood out from the crowd, specifically Bow Down Before the One You Serve.
Sure.
I can't think of the title of the song right now. But a really definitive moment in my musical history, and this is probably, the best way to answer your question. My dad and brother both had record collections, but I found my brother's more interesting because, like, the album covers were like a little bit more current and like, interesting, scary, cool, sexy, whatever. And there was a lot of stuff in there, like Van Halen. He is a big Van Halen fan. And like Kiss was one of my kind of early obsessions. But to be honest with you, the moment that I discovered rock and roll was the age of 12. It was the springtime. I grew up in Long Island, so East Coast, springtime. It's early May. It's warm-ish out, but it's really wet and raining, gray out, but like a pleasant, quiet rain. I guess I was home from school early, or just home from school, and everyone's out of the house, and I'm in like the living room where the record player is, and I take Black Sabbath, We Sold Our Souls for Rock and Roll. Put it on, drop the
Awesome.
needle, and then all of a sudden I just hear like the rain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm like looking out the window. So it's kind of like, it's
Right.
almost like I'm hearing what's going on outside. And then it's just the distant bell and the boom,
Right.
down. I was like, whoa. And I mean, it was like I was like lifted up off the ground. I was just so blown away by what I was hearing. And then later on that day, the next the next album that I played and the first song that stood out was
Detroit Rock City.
Yeah, so there you go. That's the moment I discovered rock and roll.
Dude, you gave such a great description. I got goosebumps from that story you just told me.
Awesome.
Honestly,
yeah,
that's
for
great.
real.
And
cool.
And
yeah,
that's the reason I kind of ask these type of questions, because it's fun to go back and remember things that maybe you don't always go back and look at, but it's fun to, to rediscover, oh, you know what? And this might even lead to something, even, for you later on in the week that and it might trigger something else you remember, because I'm sorry. I remember, I told this story a couple other times in regards to, I grew up around a neighborhood that had, one neighbor had a lot of girls in the house, and another house next door to me had boys and girls. But I was the little flirty kid, and at my age, Donny Osmond and Marie Osmond were a big thing.
Nice. Yeah.
So, they got me to start singing Puppy Love and that type of thing. That was my first experience, singing. I can't sing, whatever. I still can't sing. But those are the memories that every time I ask that type of question, it comes back to me. Now, Boston is the first band that I can physically remember sitting in my parents' car, and that came on the radio. And the song, their music is what grabbed me and it still holds me to this day. Anytime I hear about it,
Yeah, and how appropriate. Like, I could just like picture probably the car stereo with the dials, and like the little slider for the,
pretty much
AM radio, right?
Yeah, it was an old Chrysler, that we had, and it definitely had all those push buttons, to get to the next station.
Yeah. Except those speakers were not ready to handle what Boston was about to lay down.
Exactly right. No, they weren't. And my brother and I, growing up, we went through a lot of stereo systems.
I'm sure.
My parents' cars. So
yeah. That's great. That's awesome. One other thing too, kind of just piggybacking off what you're saying right before that, where I remember seeing an interview with Jacob Dylan. I think it was on Joe Rogan or something, and something he said, I don't think it's something like a phrase he coined, but he was like, nostalgia is the most powerful drug. And I agree with that. And why I thought of that is because not necessarily like Detroit Rock City and like the opening Black Sabbath track, but it's like all the stuff that I later got into, just a mere 2 years later, Alice in Chains' Dirt, let's say Soundgarden, an assortment of songs are still things that just hit me in a different way amongst anything that I listen to, new stuff I get turned on to. And I love a lot of new stuff, but it just hits my soul in a different way when I hear stuff from like that coming of age era.
Yeah.
So, I think that statement that, nostalgia is the most powerful drug is accurate, especially when it comes to music. And I think something that is almost inescapable as like an element that's going to be, if you write songs, that's going to be, kind of present in your music throughout your growth. Even if you kind of change your style, there's still some kind of like connection to the period and stuff that, right? So
yeah, and especially, and I know you're a songwriter as I am too. So this will move into the second question, because you kind of led us into it, which is perfect. So as a songwriter, do you write the music first and then lyrics, or do you write the lyrics first and then, or do you do a combination of the two?
I mean, it's only I guess it's actually not that simple of an answer, but yeah. So the music always comes first in the regard that I need something to kind of either hang be the foundation for the melody that's going to come from, the vocal end of things, or the melody is maybe defined by the instrument first. But what's interesting is that most of the things that get written, or the things that are written that get augmented to be better, are usually done in my head, away from any instrument I'm using, and are usually hummed first. So in a way, yeah, it gets written. And I would say that more nowadays. There's been plenty of times I've attempted to do it where it's just like only coming from the instrument. And there's exceptions to everything, right? Like it's not like every song has gone this way, but so for instance, like there's a song I'll be releasing soon that it's actually on one of the Feedback Fridays called The Melody, and I started on guitar, and just a not super interesting kind of guitar vamp on acoustic, and it was a cool idea, but like never really went anywhere beyond the verse. It was just always just a setup, and it took going over to piano/keyboard to sort of notate it, transpose it to figure out what was going on and where it could go to actually open it up to become the song that it became. And that probably also, entailed like me walking away from all instruments and just like, and humming it out, almost subconsciously, where I'm not trying to actively like, solve anything.
Right.
So a lot of it kind of comes that way. But I'll say one more thing too, which is that a lot of stuff, let's just say where I've landed as an artist at this point in time, and I mean like, within the last, let's say, couple of years or something. What I tend to do now that works very well is I save some of the writing soul for the session stage, the tracking stage, because there are some things that you bring it to the table and all of a sudden it doesn't work so well. And then it's like, well, what do you do now? It's like, do you like stop and go back to the drawing board, or you just try to figure it out in the moment?
Right.
And I have found with the last 3 songs that writing as I go in a session, trying to make everything, not everything, trying to make a few elements sound nice and well-rounded, so that like as I'm doing it, I'm not just hearing like a goofy dry vocal that like that's the problem, and not so much how I'm singing it. Like, I don't get caught up in that. Trying to make it like I got enough bassline compression and reverb and blah 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 blah, so that like that's pleasant, and then I can like more confidently just riff without any boundaries, vocally or otherwise, and feel good. I try to kind of get a nice little holistic setup going right from the beginning, and then try to like navigate through it, which means then that I don't always have a whole oftentimes template laid out, like whether that be a whole drum part, whole guitar part, for like more than a minute, so
and I kind of take that same road as you do. For instance, it's 99% of the time it's my guitar. I have it sitting right here, so I grab it, and it's easy for me to grab to. And then what I'll do is I'll sit here to fiddle around with it for quite some time. And if the next day I come back and I can remember anything that I was doing the day before, then I think that there's something resonating in here. So let me try to expand on it. And then I'll do that for like 2 weeks. I'll just keep expanding on that little beginning I got. And it doesn't always work this way, but sometimes it just clicks and it goes. But most of them are at least a 2 to 3 week process of me getting the structure set down. And when you touched on, you don't really know where it's going. One thing I like to do, I just get a straight 4/4 count drum going. I'm as much as I encourage everybody out there in music world, if you're playing an instrument, get to know the click, because when you're writing and you want to get your stuff recorded, it is so important to get on that click as best as you can. I like the feel of the drum, just to
Yeah, instead of just like that, like awful
Yeah,
soulless
that
click.
tick,
Yeah,
yeah, tick,
yeah,
tick, tick. You know,
yeah, Bong, or whatever
yeah.
it is.
So
Yeah,
yeah, ping,
right.
exactly. So um, you know, that's something I do. And then just like you were saying, you know, you might just have a little short version of it, you know, and then you go back to the next day and you expand on that, on those
Yeah,
areas. You take the drum track and move it out, you know, another 16 bars or whatever you're trying to do, and
yeah,
go
and
from
but
there.
with
So,
you know, not that we're kind of like necessarily doing this right now, but you know, if anyone is watching that like wants to, let's say like is kind of more of a novice at this and wants
mhm,
to expand and like, you know, is looking for like what are some tips and tricks, right?
mhm,
It's like also I would say, so that's a good approach. You know, you take some kind of bare bones drum instrumentation and put that in there so it feels more natural.
right,
Right. So you can groove with it. But also, you know, I would caution be careful not to over, you know, if you want to, if the song's based on percussion and you, or drum percussion anyway, right? And you want to sort of, that's part of the artistry of what you're writing, you know, cool, do whatever comes to mind. But
sure,
also like, you don't have to be, you know, tethered to
right,
that beat doesn't have to dictate what your song sounds like, right? Like you want to
exactly,
keep it as more of a matter of timing. So what I was going to
right,
say too is that like that's a big thing for me is drums are involved early on, but usually I don't try to, it's weird. It's like I don't try to put down the drum pattern that I'm maybe hearing, or maybe it doesn't exist yet, but let's say I hear it first
hmm,
as I'm trying to execute the more melodic elements first, and then just set up a click, you know, a tempo and a time signature that matches what I'm doing, to just keep it rhythmically in check.
sure,
And then I'll like in little bits add the drum parts as I go to then see like, is what I'm hearing actually going to work with that? And then if
right,
not, great, because this way then I didn't hinge it all on that beat as far as like getting that beat down,
mhm,
wasting that energy on it, right?
right,
Like creative energy,
right,
and then starting to do, you know, so it's like you do have to be a little careful sometimes depending on how your mind works and
right.
your you know musical chops work with not boxing yourself or painting yourself into the wrong corner too early
Right.
on, I would say.
I
But
your music has a lot of ear candy involved. You have a lot of different
thanks.
changes, and
Yeah,
so I find it very interesting. It's great music. You sing well.
appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks.
um, and it's so above my. And I tell this to everybody. I'm such a verse, chorus, verse.
Yeah.
Straight. And so when I spoke with Nate Wyckoff last week,
Hmm.
and you guys kind of mirror one another to where it's not your typical, you know, structure of a song.
Yeah. Right.
It goes and it flows well, has great flow. Everything works as they're supposed to, and you get surprised at what is coming next. I guess that's a good
Yeah,
way to
that's
say
good.
it, you know.
Yeah.
So
I mean, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it. Yeah.
yeah, no, it is because you know, my writing ability is, you know, so basic compared to your guys's, and I enjoy what you guys come up with. The creativity is unbelievable,
Oh,
you know.
thank you.
So
That's very kind of you.
you
Yeah,
know,
Nate writes some interesting stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
Agreed.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, but the thing with that, like, to kind of demystify some of that is that I mentioned like, you know, being realistic as a
mhm,
listener or audience
right.
member, right? So there's a couple things in there. One of them, this is not what you're saying, but
Mhm,
this for sure plays a role nowadays, and really anything I've released so far, which is that I'm not interested in being self-indulgent from a time point of view. So there's stuff
yes.
in there where it's just like, yeah, like I'm like getting noodly
Right.
because I want to, but that's fine if it doesn't go on for like 16 bars,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, you know, it's like when Yes would do it, well, they're Yes. And it was
Exactly.
also like the first time anyone was doing that outside
Right.
of like classical music, right?
Right.
With me, I the direction I'm starting to go, like I would say I'm maybe heading into prog territory, but I would call it SAP, short attention. I'm sorry, uh It's short attention span. SAS, short attention span. SAS
Yeah.
Prog, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because here's the thing, and this may influence the structure you're hearing, right? So it's
Right.
like, what I'm trying to do is get into the meat and potato as quick as possible, but I want to give you an intro that's still interesting and doesn't feel rushed by the time you get to those meat and potatoes.
Right.
I want to hit you over the head with the chorus maybe twice. And it's though, like, I would like to repeat it or whatever, there's for sure this part of me where I'm just like I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep that like interest and energy up for another 2 passes. So admittedly, like, I don't want to say it's lazy, but it's sort of like like it's here. I don't want to mess it up if I do too much and then I ruin it, kind of thing.
Right.
But it's also like, what's wrong with if the song winds up being 2 minutes and 40 seconds, just forcing the person to listen to it again? Because at the end of the day, if you enjoy it, you will listen to it again, right?
Well,
so, you know,
one of your songs is 1 minute and 20 seconds. I don't know. It was the Neon.
Neon Lights. Yeah.
Neon Lights. Yeah. So
I think it's like maybe like 105, and it's actually like, you know, like 59 seconds or something. I just did it so it would get released on, you know, yeah.
but you know, but that's smart writing, because that's something that you could, if you know, it could actually be picked up for a movie spot, or it could be picked up for, you know, commercial or something, because it's short, you know, short, sweet, to this and to the point, and it was done. And I talked, you know, to bring up Nate again, last week, we were talking about punk rock, and I wasn't a big punk rock fan, you know, 80s, but my friends were, and when I listened to their music, I was used to Judas Priest. So you had like a, you know, 3 to 4 minute song, maybe longer.
Right.
Then you had Dead Kennedys that had maybe 2 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, where's the rest of the song?
Efficient.
Yeah, very efficient. Where's the rest of the song? You know,
really short albums. You know.
yeah. They had like maybe 20 songs on one record. You know, it's like,
wild.
You know, it was
or the Ramones. Don't forget the Ramones. Yeah.
Right. But you know, when you said the Ramones, and Nate did too, and I didn't get a chance to mention this to Nate. I didn't. It wasn't the same type of punk to me, the Ramones,
not at all,
as that era of music. You know, where with Billy Idol, and you know, him coming up in those English territory bands,
right?
But I still love the Ramones. Don't get me wrong. You know, it was
almost their own category.
Yeah, and to be honest, I probably liked them better because it was touching on, you know, it was still punk, but it was still kind of riding on a different genre, which is going to lead me to my next question for you.
Go for it.
Because watching your podcast, you have a world of knowledge of genre.
Oh, thanks.
Way above my ability to. I have such a difficult time to set a certain song in a place
arrangement of
styles, and you seem to have that down, you know, unbelievably, because I was listening to you and I'm like, man, if I know country, I know rock, you know, and but as far as the rest of it goes, you know, maybe some pop stuff, but you were mentioning genres that I've no idea. So
you know, and I think like I think regardless, like we're both probably aligned on that. Like, we like a lot of different styles of music, right? In this case, you're just talking about what's sort of like, you know, from like what feels natural point of view. You know, are you able to do that or not, right? And I think that for me, if the question is sort of like how do you kind of like,
well, fill me in on how did you get to the level you are with that type of knowledge? Because I think it's important that people know what genre they're actually writing in, and because sometimes you might not be in the genre you think you are.
Right. Okay. All right. This is interesting.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. Let's get into this. So, I think that first of all, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable with appreciating a new style of music and accept that you're maybe not going to like it at all the first couple passes. So I think we can all relate that, like, there's a song we've listened to, album we've listened to, or movie that we now love, but the first 2 times we're like, I don't get it, you know?
Yeah.
So there's that. And just, you know, so first tell yourself, like, okay, I can relate to that. Great. Then you have to sort of acknowledge that if you don't like something, you should be able to articulate why.
Right.
So if you kind of give something a chance and then you still don't like it because you have a very specific critique of it,
right,
that's great. That's probably what you want, because then you can kind of be more definitive about it. So there's that, you know, like, be discerning with the proof.
right, yeah.
You know, I don't like it is never a good answer, or they suck is never a good, you know, value judgment, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So, and then also to be curious, like, you know, not everyone's very curious, and sometimes it is a muscle to flex. So, you know, well, look, like, the flip side of what I'm saying is, like, if you don't like something, you should learn enough about it to understand why, like I was saying, and then you can use that as a tool, right? So it's like, if you're going to be debating someone on, like, a political topic, you better know what their issues are and what they would say to you about why they're right. So yeah. But now I think, so let's say, you know, you kind of, you work all that out and you're like, all right, I'm going to, like, learn as much as I can about, like, pop country, because I do want to write something in that genre, you know. You know, this is, I also think, where it's important to learn, and here's where we're really in the wheelhouse of, like, our community, important to learn the arrangement and production nuances of that genre. And not so much just, like, from a, you know, yeah, sure, watch videos and conversations with people that have produced this stuff, engineered this stuff, or that have written this stuff, but you have to start to train your ear to pick out the nuances between different genres, from, like, a arrangement and execution point of view, you know. So, like, for instance, like, you know, funk's gonna always have, like, a lazy, laid back sort of, like, swingy kind of thing going on, where they're definitely in time, but, like, you know, if they're doing things on a downbeat, like, everything's going to be following, you know, the downbeat all the time. You know, you listen to what's happening on, you know, like, Mothership Connection, Parliament, you know, Funkadelic. You know, there's so much that the bass and the drum kit is driving in that, like, it's, you know, they're almost kind of melded together. You have to look at, I guess, like, what would be some sort of genre specific examples that maybe are not as obvious. You know, like in punk, for example, it's all about almost, like, speed and attitude. And, like, you know, to your ears, something may sound like they tried to make it sound bad, but it's almost like the other way you would want to look at it is, like, they're more concerned about the passion they're trying to, you know, get across the speakers, rather than, like, the exact tone of that guitar. But like the drumming, here's an interesting thing about punk. If we're talking about, like, you listen to it against other genres, and let's talk about, like, old school punk, like, or, you know, originalish punk. Let's say, like, it's Sex Pistols, or like the Misfits is maybe a good example. Everyone in the band may be, like, mediocre. The bass player, the guitar player, and certainly the singer. Misfits would be the exception with the singer, because Glenn was actually a really good singer in that, you know, genre at that time, at that register. But the drummers are always, like, super fast, technical, and nasty. And in my opinion, punk kind of falls apart if you don't have, like, a skilled, quick drummer. So
I agree.
That's something I picked up on very early. And here's another thing too. As far as, like, from a writing point of view, you know, maybe not even thinking about arrangements yet, but just sort of, like, naturally gravitating towards being able to kind of play a few different genres without thinking too much about it. When I was, so, you know, arguably I start to get into rock and roll in 1992, and I'm playing guitar sometime by like early 94. And then like, shortly after I join a punk band and yada, yada. But needless to say, I'm like every other guitar player, I'm like trying to like absorb everything that I'm listening to, all the, so it's like,
Right.
you name it. I'm like into Danzig, White Zombie, the Chili Peppers, Jane's Addiction, like everything that was blowing up, Nine Inch Nails at the time.
Sure.
One kind of common thread with like a lot of these bands I'm mentioning is like, it's obviously very guitar centric and heavy, but punk, metal, and funk were all, and I was listening to more than the Chili Peppers, but were all kind of like very rhythmic and tight and following their own sort of, not so much time signatures because they were pretty much all 4/4, but like they all had a pace to them that was cadence, tight and specific. Right. Metal and punk were kind of fast, and like funk wasn't too far off if you're talking about something like early Incubus or or even a lot of the Chili Peppers stuff before Blood Sugar Sex Magic. Like some of it's pretty fast. Right. So I think that like I subconsciously absorbed like the rhythmic nuances between those different genres, such that eventually kind of creeped into when I would write like my stylistic choices.
Right. And it shows. And I think that's so important to put into your music. And like you just said, and a lot of times you put it, not even realize you do it too. It's just, this happens because it's part of you, is who you are.
Yes.
And I've noticed that about myself. And there were 2 songs I listened to today from you, and there was a chord in one of the songs. Actually, both songs had this certain band from the early 2000s, and I'm curious to know if they had an influence on you, and that's Puddle of Mud. Was that anybody you listened to at all? Or
I mean, it may have had an influence just in passing, but what I would guess is that I probably was influenced by whatever they were influenced by.
Right. Okay. Because man,
like whether it was like Nirvana or Alice in Chains or Soundgarden. Because I think I know where you're going with this, but go ahead.
Well, that's my thing. I was just kind of curious to know if Puddle of Mud was one of those bands from the that era of influence.
Yeah. So you're on the right track with the question. So it's like I'll like, I won't like embarrass myself, but I'll see if I can at least identify the chord I'm thinking you're thinking of. Okay, I'm relatively in tune, but in Despair with Flair was kind of an unofficial ode to like 90s grunge.
Yeah.
Not so much like I was trying to sound like that, but it was like I said, this was an important.
That's the song I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay. It was probably like there's like a banana in Blood into Wine.
Right.
That to me, it's like
and I'm sorry. I'm really bad when it comes to music theory. So I think maybe it might be what they call a diminished chord. I don't know.
Yeah. So there's something in that song which is like sorry, I haven't played it in a while, so don't judge me, anyone who's but like
that's all right.
So
there you go. That's it.
Like
that's the chord there.
Yeah. Anyway, I have to double check my what key I was in, but yeah, there's that's diminished, and I just kind of hammer. Yeah, and that was that was sort of like that's a good example too of like that was always there in the song. I use it in one of the other songs on Despair with Flair, but like in a really kind of subtle way.
Right.
And that's a good example of having a core idea that no matter what was going on with changes in the song, that always kind of had to stay in there and things had to hinge around that.
Right.
Because it gave like a little bit of drama to the song. Thank you.
Yeah, I Puddle of Mud, I don't know if you ever listened to the whole entire album.
No. I just probably know the she hates me, right? And
yeah,
I
encourage you.
I'll go back and listen to it for sure.
that first record they did, and I think it was Fred Durst from, I
Limp
think he
Bizkit?
was Limp Bizkit. I think he's the one who produced it,
Oh,
or
interesting. Okay.
or discovered him, one of the two.
Yeah.
But it is so good, and I
Interesting.
forgot how good it was.
Yeah.
And then driving down to Lake Havasu one day, I got my old CD thing out,
Yeah.
and I still have a CD player in my truck, so
Nice.
lock on to me.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
pulled it out
I
and I
have one in the
stuck it in.
Subaru. It's fine. Yeah. Yeah.
And even my wife was like, "Who is this?" And I go, "It's just Puddle of Mud." And she was like, "Man, they're good." I go, "It's the whole record, dude, from song 1 to song 12 or whatever, 14,
Yeah.
all the way through. There isn't one bad song on that entire record."
Okay, interesting. I'll have to go back and spin that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it may have all came into like went into the hopper, the musical hopper, where like because I'm sure I at least heard 3 of their songs from,
Well,
radio play, etc.
they were, at that era, we went through the Alice in Chains era. We went through
Hmm.
Nirvana, and
Hmm.
then it was moving on to Linkin Park,
Yeah. Hmm.
and then Puddle of Mud.
Okay.
Uh,
Interesting.
and those, the first Linkin Park record, another outstanding,
Yeah. Yeah, that is good for
another
sure.
one,
Yeah, there's so much great music, like,
there is.
throughout the 90s into the 2000s. We really were lucky.
Yeah, yeah, and CLA, man, he was pushing them out like like they were hotcakes.
Oh, yeah,
Bruce
that's right. Yeah, of
Algae,
course. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but I just found that I had to ask that question, man, because
Hmm.
that
Oh,
chord it's a chord that you don't hear that often used in that
well, let
style.
me
So
and let me say something about that too, because yeah, so this is actually this tickles me because it's like one of those things where like it was sort of a deliberate choice, and I appreciate you picking up on it. So if you'll indulge me for a second,
sure.
the reason that's in there, I think, is not just so much the genre leaning feeling
Hmm.
it evokes, but um, so that's the 6th degree of the, is that the 6th? I'm sorry, it's the 7th. Is it the 7th grade? Hang on, so you got like uh
Take your time.
hang on a second, you got tonic, minor, minor, 4, 5, 6, and then yeah, sorry, no, I'm sorry, it's the 7th in the chord, so it's the half step before you come back around and hit the
Hmm.
octave.
Hmm.
Okay, so it's it's like major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, and then back to the
Right,
tonic and the next.
right.
Okay, it's always a kind of chord that like you're not going to just play that and sing over it,
No.
right? Like it's kind of like a passing tone, passing
Right,
chord.
right.
And I remember like I was watching like this one channel on YouTube, I think it's like Signals Music Studio. He does like a lot of cool music
Hmm.
theory stuff. And he was talking about that the diminished in the context of something else. It wasn't just about diminished. And I was like, that'd be interesting to sort of use that as like a kind of like a linchpin or anchor
Hmm.
element in a song. And so again, that there's 2 songs that
Hmm.
use that kind of hammer approach. And what's nice about it is like I don't know what that resolves to when you hammer it. It's probably like some minor
Right.
chord that's like, in or out of the key. I don't know. But it's fun because it's like diminished gets its day in these songs, and like
Right.
I think as you're picking up on it, it evokes something in your brain. It's like that was the goal. It makes me
Right.
happy to
Right.
hear that, because it's like it's more than just like going straight up to the
Right.
again, whatever the tonic is,
Right.
instead of just like resolving, it's kind of
Right.
hanging out for a while. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
it it resonated with me, and it's such
that's
a,
awesome, dude.
it's one of those it's so ugly it's good.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I
that's the
mean?
idea. Yeah,
That's what I like about that
I appreciate that.
those diminished notes, and
Yeah,
it's um anyways, I really
it's great,
appreciate
dude.
that answer, man.
Oh yeah, of course.
Before we move on to the next
Yes.
question, um
Yeah.
that they touched on, and one of the ones, I just real quick, you were talking about indie music,
Mm.
and and we had this little conversation over the World Wide Web
Yeah.
after I watched your little clip,
Right. Right.
and you were talking about how indie music, uh, is leaning on the girls are the ladies so much, girls,
Yeah.
ladies, women,
Yes.
you know, yeah, I think, it's, you know, we've always had just a handful of ladies out there, um, you know, what I consider, you know, Ann Wilson,
Yeah.
you know, from, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
Heart.
Heart, thank you.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
You know, and then, you know, of course, gosh darn it,
Carol
um,
King.
yeah, and then Joan Jett,
Hmm.
and then you know, and there were some other
Sheryl
ones.
Crow,
Crow,
like,
right, right,
Fiona Apple's one of my favorites,
right. But you were talking about a band, and I can't not remember their name.
There's The Last Dinner Party,
Yes, that was them.
all female band, pretty
Right,
fantastic.
right,
Lime Garden, which I'm only currently still familiar with, like a couple songs, and then Mae Simone's is another one who's more kind of jazz leaning, really,
right.
really fantastic as well.
Well, my thing here, and then, you know, don't hate me all for this, ladies
No,
out there,
no,
but
yeah,
back
yeah,
in the
yeah,
day, it was such a cliche to have an all girls band. You know, that was not looked down upon, you know, so to speak, but it you know, how do I
It
say
was looked
it?
at
So, you
as a
know,
gimmick,
a gimmick,
yeah,
exactly.
like
That's
the
a good,
Runaways,
yeah,
let's
yeah, and
specifically, yeah,
right, but nowadays, man, there's so many talented girls that play instruments and guitar.
yeah.
You know, I'm just blown away by the sheer talent, and you know, not you know, and hopefully I'm not coming off
Well, let
sexist
me
or you know,
let me tack on to what you're
but
saying too. This way, we could share the cancel leaning, subject matter.
right,
But
right,
it's all, we're all complimentary here, so
right,
everyone
right.
relax. Um, no, which is that what I think, and I don't know if I got into this in the episode, but especially in a genre indie that's like kind of defined by not being defined, but where, let's say, indie certainly doesn't have to follow any conventional rules that pop music does. So
Right,
it can be as complicated or interesting or uninteresting or polished or not polished as it wants to be, right?
correct.
Which is nice. And one thing I was finding with going through these playlists is that, like, there's just like a lot of like really rich, interesting music in there. And then there's stuff you would expect where it's just kind of more stripped down and, like, you'd kind of miss it. But a
Hmm.
lot of it's really thoughtful and well written. What I would say with the sort of kind of more dense female presence, especially like an all female band,
Hmm.
that I think works so well is that, I think that, and this is where, I'll be careful how I phrase it, because I mean this nothing as a compliment, but I think there's a lot of, sort of emotional intelligence from coming from the female sensibility, and that
Hmm.
lends itself to good writing.
Right,
So not just even sort of lyrical choices, but musical choices as well. Like what, because, like, at the end of the day, you're always trying to evoke an emotion.
right,
So it's like, how would I play this guitar part? How would I write this, piano line, etc.
right,
So, I think that's also what you hear in a lot of these current great examples that we have.
right. I have, you know, twin girls, so there's nothing but encouragement for me, and
Yeah.
I hope
Yep.
one day that they actually get the music bug. They really haven't got it yet, but I really do. You know, I want that for them. I'm not
Right.
forcing it down upon them, but I
Yeah.
want them to discover themselves, you know, in that fashion.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so, you know, please,
You can get
ladies,
backup singers for
no.
mom,
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. You
at the very
know,
least.
yeah. Please, ladies, know that I love everything you guys do. That's the
Yes.
bottom line.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed. We're all on the same
So
page here.
more of it. I guess that's the thing. Is
Yes.
more of it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what
I
I'm trying to
agree.
say.
I agree.
So
Like I said, uh, there's just such a great sort of, I think, ability to articulate certain topics and emotions and stuff. And like I mentioned her before, like Fiona Apple is one of my
right.
favorite artists of
And
all
and
times. And yeah.
and for me, writing is 90% of the stuff I write. I had to give it a female perspective.
It's a good
And
point.
then, you know, and so
Yeah.
because my wife, she's a singer, and so I have to go down that road,
Yeah.
and um, which is a good thing for me.
You need your wife to take the cargo pants off of your music and put on some nice fitting chinos. That's what it is.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
know, and then she comes back and then corrects the stuff that I got wrong. So, you know, which is
Right.
great.
Yeah. Right. It's awesome. It's amazing.
So, but anyways, now I want to, you know, that was a bonus question or bonus round right there. That was what I call
Awesome.
that. So, number 4.
Yep.
Tell us about your journey completing your first EP, Despair with a Flare.
Awesome.
What was the bad and the good experiences in completing it?
Sure.
And I lead with bad.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's a loaded question in a good way that I have answers for. I was just kind of like, where to start? So yeah, sure. Let's start with the bad. So the bad. Well, this isn't necessarily bad, but it's an interesting, you know, kind of. Can't think of the word, but so there's 3 songs, and the order that they appear in on the EP is the order I wrote and recorded them, and so I don't even know if the quality or sound of the songs reflects this, but they each took like if you did it backwards, each song took exponentially longer than the other one, right? So them was like you know, probably like a 3-month affair to track for several reasons. One of them being getting the right room sound, I guess, for the guitars. So if you like the guitars on that in terms of like their presence and tonality, it took a while to get the right space, and the right space wound up being a garage with 0 sound dampening other than what was already there, which was concrete floors, really old wood from the 1930s, and a lot of stuff in there.
It has a bright tone to it.
It does, but it's not too reverberant.
No,
like I didn't have to do anything to get like room sound away from, you know.
Right.
That's also where all the verse vocals were captured, and they were captured on my AKG 3214 before I realized how bright it was. So I just like EQ'd the hell out of it, you know, after the fact. And then quite honestly, just like the last sort of trickiest part was getting the nailing the chorus vocals, because I hadn't yet learned to sing how I start to sing on First Night, and then on the new stuff that you've heard like maybe some of, but you know, will be released soon. So it's me like just kind of straight up yelling to hit those notes.
Right.
And it's one of those things where like I put the multi-tracks in the Academy, and one of our brethren remixed it and did a great job. But like I was like, when I first heard it, I was like cringing, because it was like there was vocals in there that like I was previously hiding with like volume dips and stuff like that, where I'm hitting sour notes. I was like, oh no, I should have taken all that out, you know. But anyway, so it just took long from a tracking point of view, because I'll say it like this: other than just sort of, it was the first of the 3, and I had a lot more to learn. So I was like, really, it was causing more effort than it would have, you know, later on. It was also a matter of like, I need to get this one pinned down the right way, the way I'm hearing it, and then reflect that in the production to some degree before I move on to anything else, because I have no business. I'll have such like a inconsistent work. So, you know, for the reasons I just explained, them was the most difficult.
Right.
But,
And,
you know,
and that's what I say when I say bad. I don't mean like, you know, oh, bad experience, but like, you know,
what was, no,
you know, the stuff you had to fight through to get to where you were.
Sure.
And then what about the good? What did you know?
So, and then just to give like, sorry, I'm just going to have a cough drop, just to give like lip service to it. The other 2 songs, Blood into Wine was more technically complex, but whatever sort of recording machinations that like I struggled with in like doing them were kind of solved by the time I got to Blood into Wine. So it was just a matter of figuring out like, how do I arrange this thing properly? And then like Undo Myself was kind of light and fast in comparison, because it was like everything, you know, all the other stuff had been worked out. It was a simpler song, and I had everything like dialed in correctly. So it was just more of like, all right, get another take, you know? And they were all subject to, and this was both, you know, like pleasant and painful feedback in the Academy. So all of you guys, probably you included at some point, were all like being like, this is working, this isn't, blah, blah, blah. So I got like a lot of like chip it down, chip it away advice that helped speed up the process that would have otherwise taken longer.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, what were you saying right before that?
No, that's that. You know, it's when I say good, the bad with the good.
Yeah.
So what you did is that you evolved. You went from here to
100%.
here.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, another important detail in that too is that it was all done in GarageBand. So this was before I started using Logic. So which for the most part didn't change much of the approach, or sorry, the approach then wasn't so much different. It was just that I wasn't like bussing and sending.
Right.
So other than just whatever sort of mixing techniques I hadn't yet learned or employed yet, other than like what, you know, those things that affect what you're hearing in those final versions, I'm sure there's some kind of stereo width inconsistencies by not being able to, you know, send certain amounts of that signal to different, you know, effects auxiliaries to get like the proper kind of like stereo image. So, you know, like would I go back and remix all of it? Absolutely. But, you know, that'll be down the line. It's like, that was exhausting to get through.
Right.
Yeah. But it felt great, you know, getting it done and everything, of course, like actually putting out like, as you know, it feels good to just like, whether it was always a goal of yours or just being able to kind of like get a set of works out that like sounded like what was in your head is a good feeling, you know?
Right. No, and you do everything by yourself, right? You don't collaborate. You don't collaborate.
Yeah.
Right?
The only thing obviously is, and hopefully it's obvious because they're amazing, is the drums, right? So I like all of the tracks before the drums were added. So shout out to Corey Hi-Fi Frey, another one of our PLAP members. Awesome. Hire him. He is amazing. You know, you just get a completed track, send it to him, gets the drums, you mix it to taste, and but he, you know, he does so much. He'll give you like, I don't know, like 12 different, you know, or like 15 different tracks of Mike's pieces of the kit, and like, you know, there'll be like 4 sets of like room mic. It's crazy. But anyway, I would do the complete sort of drum patterns for everything mapped out as best as I could, and then would give that to him, and he'd be like, okay, and then he would just do like a better version of it. And But
and
everything else was me.
That's what Sergio and I do.
Right.
We work the same type of thing out. So
yeah,
and it's smart.
That's a good working relationship.
And I encourage those people that are looking, you know, to work with somebody. Do reach out. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
You know, 99.9% of people that will collaborate with you, they don't care how good you are. They just want to have fun doing music. So, you know, that's encourage yourself to do it, because the more you structure yourself around people that do know what they do or what they're doing, the better you're going to become in the long run doing it.
Yeah. And like give your work the opportunity to benefit from, you know, if there's something that, you know, you're not going to be able to execute, but you can hear it, like allow someone who, you know, represents that instrument to get in there and help you out, you know.
I've done it with guitar solos. I've had songs where nope, it ain't working out. Hey, who wants to do this? Cause it's not working. I can't get what I want. You know, I fired myself from guitar solos doing that.
Yeah.
So
I would do that too, because that's not my forte. I'm more of a rhythm guy. Yeah. In fact, and this is not like such a great quintessential, like, you know, like example in terms of like the artist, but like, you know, Rick Springfield's guitar parts on the recording, like he wrote the song and he tried to do all the guitar parts, and the producer was like, get out of here. Like, had someone else do it, and like it probably was the right choice, and I think he made peace with that, you know. But
yeah, of course. He's a good looking guy, so he didn't care.
right. But I mean, I'm saying like he, you know, that is his song. No, you know, it's like
right. Well, yeah, that actually that happened.
I'm sorry, for Jesse's Girl specifically. That's why I should have called out the song. Yeah.
You know, believe it or not, I my understanding, it happens more often than you realize.
Sure.
So, you know.
Yeah.
But you got to check the ego at the door, and you know,
you do
bring the best product forward. That's the way you do.
But also, like, if you find that you can, sort of take on more of the arrangement than you think you normally would, just accept that it's going to be, you know, extra difficult and take a lot more time than it would otherwise, So
Right.
it's just like everything has a sort of a counterbalance to it,
Right.
So,
Yeah.
which is why, like, and that's the thing too. It's like, it's good that I can self-produce, because I'm like, it's not even like an insecurity. I would drive a mixing engineer nuts with the amount of like vocal takes I'd need to redo, So,
Well, that's the beauty of today's music, is that we can sit there and hit that record button as many times as we want. So
ain't that the truth? Yeah.
All right. Question number 5. Last question of the long ones here. So
Yeah.
what do you find harder, writing music or hosting a podcast?
Oh, that's an interesting question. You got some good questions, Andy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Probably writing music. I would say trying to make the podcast more interesting is infinitely more difficult, but that's like, sort of a style content thing. So, well, if we're just talking about that, then it's the podcast. But in general, as an art form, music, just because, like starting out and getting something going, you could say like, yeah, it's easy, it comes natural, and it does, but making it sound truly good and getting there is a lot of, heart and soul and hard work in a way that any of the podcast stuff I've done it has not been yet,
Right.
So yeah, there's more of like I'm leaving many pieces of myself in there, but I have to arrange them in the right way with music, and it's not really, I like the podcast, but it's not the same kind of like battlefield,
Right. And if you're leaning more passion, which one do you lean more towards?
100% music. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's me too.
Yeah.
I enjoy doing this and
Yeah.
meeting people and talking to them. I'm a chatty Cathy, so to speak.
Yeah.
I love to talk.
Same here. Yeah.
So, and the more I do this, the more I see mirrored images of all of us. We have similarities. The stories are different, yet they follow a certain path down this certain path we all follow in music. And it's so much fun to experience this with people.
Yeah, I agree.
And go ahead.
Another thing with that as well, my motivation for the podcast initially was to sort of, I did want to talk about music and interview people and stuff, but it was also like initially, fueled by like trying to have another kind of promotional angle for the music, or just like a presence that, cause like I'm not necessarily going to do like music videos, maybe, but that's not the plan as of right now. And either way, what's interesting about that, tell me what you think of this, is like, because we don't create physical albums anymore, and then even when we're releasing to streaming, if we're so inclined to do more than a handful of songs for a release, right, which I would argue is not always worthwhile, like certainly every time, like you don't always need to do 10 songs, because we have such a short attention span culture anyway, and blah blah blah. But another thing that gets lost with all that, let's just say like the dial is set to like, you do a handful of songs in a release, and great, that formula works. And yeah, there's artwork, and you could do like the Canvas stuff on Spotify, and there's other like digital takeaways, but like no one's really like spending time like sitting at the edge of their bed just like thumbing through like they would with in the past with like liner notes and okay. And the artwork's even sort of trivial nowadays in the regard that it's not something you're sitting and staring at the whole time, because it's a thumbnail somewhere that So I would argue that all of this peripheral stuff that we do is part of the art form now, right? So that we may not be all inclined to do it, like you don't want to be on camera, or you don't want to make content or whatever, but in a way, if you can weave that into the music you make, which we all do inadvertently through promotion, that's kind of part of the art form now. It's almost like that's the album cover kind of stuff, and the liner notes, and the behind the scenes, whatever. So
Yeah.
There's that too.
Yeah, it's you hit it on the head right there. That's very true.
Yeah.
The more I do it, and unfortunately, because of the family situation, Linda and I,
Mhm.
we really can't go out and play live somewhere. It's just
Right.
too
Oh
much
yeah, of
involved
course.
with it. There's
Yeah.
if we did, there's band practice, and then we're taking time away from the kids, and
Right.
so there'll
Kind
be
of
a
has to be
time.
one thing or the other, you know. It's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
yeah,
And right now,
yeah.
family
Yeah,
outweighs that.
I'm sorry. When I
So
say one thing or the other, I mean like, spend time on like the record, like the
sure,
recorded form and blah blah blah, or you do the
right,
band thing. One of the,
right,
yeah,
right, right. And no, but I was getting your point was, nowadays with music, you don't have to be someone that goes and plays shows. You can
100%.
be a songwriter and just put music out for people to enjoy,
Yep.
you know, which is great. Uh, and if you get a chance to go out and play, all the better to you, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
No.
um,
Agreed. Agreed.
I have friends that go out and play all the time, but they can. So, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
I think in my case though, like I've kind of I hit a fork in the road at a certain point where it was like, where do I want to put the energy and
yeah,
which is what
that's
we're already kind of saying, of course,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, but also like, what do I get more out of, really, right? Like I mean, it
yeah.
would be great to perform anything I've written,
Right.
and
Same
and I'm
here.
sure at some point one day I will, but it's so much more important to like write the good song that sounds good and like
Exactly.
can be enjoyed at any time, any moment, than like having that one glory moment on stage with it,
Right.
so
Yeah,
at
I
least now
agree.
that's how I feel.
No,
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean,
So,
like it's like, by the way, like you guys are so fantastic and sound so good. It's
thank
like,
you.
that's enough for me. I would love to see it live, but like it
Thanks.
works as is. Yeah. Yeah. So
And vice versa. So
thanks, man.
let's move on to rapid
Okay.
fire questions. Now you can
Here we go.
expand on it if you want to. You can just
Sure.
keep them short and sweet, whatever you want to do.
Okay.
No rules. Like in mixing, no rules. As long as we get to
Yeah.
the end, that's what
Right.
matters. So,
Right.
all
Yeah.
right. Question number one: favorite genre of music?
Mm. uh, somewhere between singer-songwriter and rock.
Perfect. Great
Yeah.
answer. Great answer.
Thanks.
Okay. Question number two. I like it. It was short and sweet and to the
Thanks.
point. Favorite current artist or band? So this will kind of tie into that first question.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, yeah. I'm like, I'll keep it current. Um, I'm gonna be honest too.
Sure.
Uh, oof, that's a tough one. Okay, I mean, no, that's not, because I can't just go by like, oh, I really like like a few songs off this one album, and I'm not listening to it constantly. But all right, I'll say this: like, if you asked me a year ago, someone who was contemporary, where I could really sink my teeth into all their stuff, I would say the Lumineers.
Oh
Um,
man,
yeah,
they're great, dude.
yeah. I mean, there's probably other artists that like I feel more strongly about based on less of this, a fewer songs as the example of why I think they're so great. But yeah, if you asked me like 2 years ago, I would probably say them, just because I think like
I just
they've
think
very much hit the nail on the
I
head.
think their structure of their songs is amazing. That's
Yeah.
and they're fun.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Because anything else
You
I'm going to
know?
tell you is going to be like some bands that are still around, but like are not like current artists. Like
Right,
if I
right,
said Queens of the Stone Age or something like that, it's like it's
right.
relevant, but it's not kind of answering the question. So
And
I think Lumineers qualifies.
and Queen of the Stone Age is one song my one daughter and I, anytime it comes on the radio, we sit there and crank it up. My wife and my other daughter go, oh God.
I know they're
Dun,
so
dun,
damn
dun,
good though.
dun, dun.
It's
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anyways, that's a fun answer. I like that.
Yeah.
I love
Thanks.
that. I love the band too. So,
They are great.
all right, number three.
Okay.
List me the instruments you play, and out of those
Okay.
instruments, which do you find the most challenging to play? Not your favorite,
Sure.
the most challenging.
Yeah. Okay. So the full list is guitar, bass, keyboard / piano and drums. Hands down, the drums, but the piano is a close second. The piano tonally, I have more chops in, but there's an equal level of difficulty in this sort of opposing rhythms thing. I think at the end of the day, I am like a garbage piano player, but I could probably fake it better on piano than drums if I was in like a real, kind of quick situation where I had to accompany someone. I mean, I could play drums, but
right.
But they're equally difficult, just in kind of slightly varying ways, I guess, slightly varying various ways.
So guitar and bass, those two I'm pretty comfortable with, bass not as much as guitar, but when it comes to keyboards, I'm deep.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to playing drums, I'm 2 left feet and 2 left hands. So it's just...
yeah. That's an instrument like keyboard. You can kind of noodle long enough and get into like a rhythm over the course of a few days, where you can play a couple sort of phrases and runs like better than you could the prior 2 or 3 days. But drums is one of those. I don't know why I'm pointing this way. Drums is one of those things where you got to spend a lot of time with it, like on its own as like a whole experience, because you got to spread out and kind of like separate your 4 limbs in a way, and it's a whole thing unto itself. So
and it's always the drum and bass. If you have a good drummer and a good bass player and you have a foundation, and like we were kind of talking about punk, you know, when you have those two, the guitar players can be as, the drums and the bass, man, the foundation, that's where it lays.
But I'll say this again, like if we're kind of, leaning into the more sort of like educational end of things for anyone watching, all that being said, try to play all those instruments all the time, in terms of practice and writing stuff, but don't get discouraged with drums in the sense that if you can get a good, like when I say good, give me a second.
Sure.
If you can get a good, let me turn off the noise. If you get a good little like simple kind of drum pad that hooks up to, like ultimately a MIDI connection, but like has a USB out into your interface. What you can do is you can sort of like get bits of drum parts that you wouldn't be able to do on a kit normally, kind of like mapped out, and then you can kind of course, like shift them and quantize them to what's going on in your grid and your DAW. But here's a little trick that works very well for me, where if you're like competent enough to sort of hit any one drum part on the beat, but you can't do it all together, is, let's say you got like a 16 bar section that you're looping for now when you're writing a song, and you got a MIDI, you could do this on your keyboard too. You don't need a drum pad, but this is more natural. You should do this it'll be easier for you. So it's like during the 16 bar thing, you just hit the kick, right? Whatever the kick pattern is. Okay. And then, okay, good. Got it. Shift it, move it around, whatever. All right. Now let's do the snare. Pa, pa, right. And guess what? It'll sound perfect. And you'll have a whole kit after you do about 6 different, takes. And there you go.
That's cool.
Yeah. It works well.
Cool. Good idea. So, that's very cool. Good job.
Yeah. Cause I mean, like, and that's the thing too, like probably, and I keep referencing the stuff that's going to be released, it's very like sort of, arrangement heavy, and there's like a lot of synth and stuff going on, and stuff that like I would normally have difficulty playing outright if I was going to do these songs live. But because of what I'm talking about, like if you can kind of cycle, a couple bars and just get one thing down, you'd be surprised what you can accomplish as far as like notation and precision when you do it in these kind of smaller chunks. That was actually a Steve Majora recommendation, doing things in these kind of smaller boxed little increments, especially in instruments you're not as proficient at.
That makes complete sense. Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Question number 4. What is something you would tell younger Mike to do differently?
Spend less time trying to write cool riffs, because that's how held me back for, you know, a decade and a half in terms of writing. That's just personal.
Right.
I'm not saying that for anyone else, but as a guitar player, like, you know, I mentioned Queens of the Stone Age. It's like, as soon as they came along and I started listening to that all the time, it was just like, oh man, like, you know, I'm maybe trying to emulate stuff that Josh Homme's doing. And, you know, it's like, for me, I got away from sort of like chord tonality and key and sort of making the underlying arrangement more interesting and just focusing on like this cool riff and how it sounds, you know. And that's not right or wrong. It's just, you know,
Right.
yeah. And I'm sure there's some other, like, you know, like way more profound nuggets of wisdom from like a songwriting or music production point of view, you know,
I think Warren hit it on the head. One video he did, Warren from Produce Like a Pro, for anybody out there. He said that, you know, these guys, when they wrote these famous songs, they weren't thinking about, you know, what's this chord coming in here.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it was just what sounded right and what sounds good.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and, you know, like, cause I don't want to like kind of misspeak as far as what I'm getting at, in terms of like, if this is actionable advice. So on the flip side of what I'm saying, I do very much when I'm writing these songs, explore and kind of almost have no plan, right?
Yeah.
But so now I would argue that like my kind of writing instrument nowadays is a keyboard, piano, or whatever, and that's because I'm getting more sort of like, you know, tonal exploration out of it than I would on guitar, because of the fact that like, I don't want to go on a long tangent. I'll try to make this as short as possible, but it's just like coming across the 6 strings. They're all separated by fourths except for the second string. And other than doing your standard sort of like, you know, position 1, position 2 bar chords up and down the neck, and then your open, you know, position chords up top. Oftentimes you don't know what note you're playing, where you are when you're doing anything. That's just like 2 notes, like this far down the neck, or over here, or over there. Right. Once you start getting out of patterns that, you know, and even with jazz chords, it's like, if you remember all of the, you know, where your fingers are like, you know, like this, like even if you remember what the, yeah. You know, where like the fingers are under the string.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if you remember sort of, you know, the names of those voicings, like sometimes when you change position, you know, it's going to take you a few minutes to figure out what that collection of notes is and what a kind of chord that adds up to. So what I'm getting at is like, from a writing point of view and a theory point of view, I start to get away from the point. I get too grounded in a kind of basic patterns on guitar, whereas on piano I wind up doing all these chords and inversions that I don't realize I'm doing by noodling. But I can kind of, it's easier for me to like look in the DAW and see what I'm doing if it's like the keyboard, you know, wired into the interface, because then like if I need actual information about, you know, like what you know, chord sequences I'm using, and then I'm going to write something against that, I can kind of have it mapped out for me, you know, in front of me there. Anyway, all that to say, like, you do whatever works for you. But like, make sure that you can kind of find some semblance of melody and tonal sensor in there that works. And if your core instrument is not providing you with that, try it on something else, or try transposing your song to another instrument and see if that gives you better ideas.
And it's amazing how much more your mind will expand.
Yeah. Oh God, you
know, it is weird.
and take your song to places that it never would have went otherwise.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
So
you got that right. Last question.
Yep.
Ready for it? Drum roll.
Yep. Okay. That's my bongo.
There you go. What's your favorite microphone to use?
Right here. I only own currently 2 mics. I have the CL214, the AKG mic, and I think it's great. And it's not bad for vocals. It's just there's a lot of top end, and I feel like you have to like de-S the hell out of it, for a voice like mine. And you know, I could be doing something wrong. Maybe I need to like roll off the, you know, the or keep a flat response, or whatever the case is. I don't know, but I got the SM7B, the Shure SM7B, just for the sake of having another tried and true mic that, well, obviously everyone uses it on a podcast, that sort of thing. But I used it, like, I think next to the C214 for kind of like stereo imaging on acoustic guitar. And I think I like took a stab at singing on it because I was getting frustrated with, like, the way my voice was sounding, tracking a new song. And I was like, holy cow, like, this thing's really capturing the detail of my voice, but it's not too crispy. And I guess, like a true dynamic, it could kind of handle a little bit of oomph coming into it.
Sure.
So to be honest with you, like, I don't, it's not like I wouldn't get another mic for vocal clarity and kind of pizzazz later on, like something like a Neumann or whatever. But it's one of those things where, like, I have no need to use any other mic for vocals for myself or anyone that I would record. It's a pretty well-rounded mic, and I'm so, like, happy with the value I've gotten out of it.
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah, I have a thing with microphone. I love microphones, and I'm not a man.
Yeah.
I'm not as addicted to microphones as Manny from Manny's Law.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm talking into an Earthworks, which is similar to your SMB setup.
Right. Yeah.
And I use it on acoustic guitar for this new song I'm writing. And what I did, I used the floor stand, and I have it actually pointed at an angle up to the acoustic, so I could actually get a little less boominess. I like a thicker sounding acoustic. So
sure. Same
anyway,
here,
my point is that I love microphones, and if I could buy more microphones, I would. My wife says no. So happy wife, happy life.
Probably wise decision. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That too.
And down the road I'll buy some more. So
what do you track Linda's vocals on typically?
Normally it's her microphone of choice is an SE, and it's a Z56A.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Z5600A.
Condenser.
It's a condenser tube.
Okay.
48, multi voicings on it. So
nice. Can you, like, change the patterns and stuff on it?
No, I keep it a dynamic, or Omni, because that's what we call it.
Oh, Omni. Okay, yeah. Nice.
So that's what I keep on it. But then we do backups. I will go and I'll put it in the figure 8, and we'll go front and back to one another.
Cool. Okay.
Interesting. So we can do that.
Very cool.
But for my vocals, when I actually sing, this mic I'm talking into does a good job, just for the same reason you're saying yours does a good job with you. Yeah. And then the other one I like is I just bought a ribbon mic, and it's from Golden Age R1.
Okay.
And the nice thing about those are the same thing. They don't have a lot of top end, so they have more of a deeper tone to them. And
I think, like, there's a lot of for sure, and I think there's a lot of value to that, in the sense that, and tell me what you think, but it's like, it's so much easier after the fact to just, like, raise up that shelf on the top end and get that clarity when you want it, rather than have to, like, just scoop out all this stuff, like, when you find all these offending frequencies,
right?
Because the other scenario is a nightmare. I found anyway.
No, it is. It is. Yeah, I agree with that. And you were talking about S's, and one trick. The one trick that I do a lot of times is, if she's singing and I have a song that I want her a little more closer up to the microphone, I'll tilt it.
Okay. Yeah.
Just a little bit, just so that wind's not coming directly into that diaphragm. So
sure. No, that makes sense.
And then the other thing too is, like, is the old pencil technique. You can tape.
On the pop screen.
Yeah, just to break up that that one
Sure.
noise. So
Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, that's such like a quirky but awesome,
yeah.
trick.
Another produce like a pro, Warren Huart.
That's right. Yeah, I remember him talking about that.
Trick,
That's really
so,
funny. Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah.
so well, with that, Mike, I hope you had a good time here on.
I had a
on
great
5.
time. Yeah. No, thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, and like
Good
I said,
questions.
thank you. And like I said, it's so much nicer to actually see each other on camera face to face.
Yeah.
Maybe one day we can actually shake hands and
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that.
Have
I'm
some
due for a
barbecue
trip
or
out
something.
to. Yeah, oh, that'd be great. Yes, I know your infamous barbecue. I need to get in on that. Absolutely.
So yeah,
For sure.
I'm much better at barbecuing than I am mixing music. So
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Well, then that's a big statement actually right there.
yeah. So,
Awesome.
but okay. Hey man,
Thank you, my friend.
You have a good night. And
You too. You too.
With that said, everybody, thank you for tuning in to 5 and 5. Mike, take care. Adios, everybody.
You too, man. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.